My name is Donna Devlin. I'm a workplace well-being trainer at Solent Mind. I'm going to tell you a little bit about us in a moment, but I want to start by just having you take a quick look at the group agreement.
You look like Lou's bloody brothers.
Again, you are going to have opportunities to share. If you want to come off mic and share something as well, if you put up your hand, that's fine. But please, let's all agree to be respectful of each other today. Sometimes we just have to agree to disagree. You might also have a story that you want to share in the chat box. Just remember that if it's not your story, to anonymize it so that I often say it's a small world. We want to make sure that we keep the confidentiality of other people in this space. 90 minutes is a long time. I'm going to try to make it interesting, make it interactive. Do please, if you need to take that time out to do that, that's fine. Particularly if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the topic today. That can happen after all. So do keep yourself safe in our conversation together today. In fact, I would just ask everybody to take a moment to think about if you needed to reach out to someone to talk to during our conversation or immediately afterwards, who might that person be? And is that person available? So just have a moment to think about that. It could be your employee assistance program. It could be a trusted friend or colleague, but have somebody ready at hand. I am going to ask you, obviously I can't see, but if you could please steel yourself from those notifications and the vibrating phone for most of the session and to try to give your attention fully to the training, that would really be appreciated. Again, thank you for those of you who are saying hello, Carol, Will, Jenny, and someone from Southampton City Council who needs to change their name. Again, if you're not, if your name is coming up as something other than at least your first name, you can rename yourself by hovering over the screen where your video is. You should see a rename icon. That will help us to be able to mention you rather than a series of letters and numbers. So I said I was going to tell you a little bit about Solent Mind. Just a quick, if anybody has heard of Solent Mind, how about a quick shout out in the chat box? Just say yes. Solent Mind has been in the Hampshire region for almost 60 years now. We are affiliated with the National Mind Network. Thank you, Janet. The difference with the local minds is that we work within the community. So we will reach out to businesses, universities, organizations, and say, what are the services that we can embed in this community to make it better? And then we deliver on those. So recently we opened an out-of-hours service in Southampton as well as in Portsmouth for mental health support, which speaks to our values that we are stronger in partnership, and when we listen, we act. Glad to see so many of you have said yes to that. This is a very quick glimpse at what Solent Mind services are available in the Hampshire region. You might notice my red arrow next to Positive Minds. And I've put that there. Positive Minds offers mental health and well-being support to people in Portsmouth, and they have partnered with Hampshire Constabulary to become a third-party reporting center. And those centers offer an alternative to speaking directly to the police about a hate crime incident. So it's a safe and confidential space to report hate crimes with additional support, obviously provided by the mental health experts at Positive Minds. If you have any questions about the services, certainly you can go to our website, where I'm happy to answer those questions at the end of today's session. So here's what I'm hoping to cover today. I don't want to minimize people into statistics, but I do think it's important that we talk a little bit about the state of play, about mental health and hate crime incidents in our area. So I'm going to cover a little bit of that. I'm going to talk a little bit about language and stigma and why language matters. And because we are talking a little bit about mental health, I'm going to give a very brief, but hopefully educational or refresher overview about some of the common mental health conditions here in the United Kingdom. We'll take a very short break if we have the time, and then we'll talk a little about those barriers to seeking help that happen for people who are targeted with hate crime incidents. We'll also talk about how you can help others based on what we have heard from service users. If we have time, I have just a couple of slides on workplace well-being strategies for those of you who are calling in from a workplace. If not, I will pause here to say that you are going to get a copy of the slides. Thank you, Sarah, for asking that. So if I don't get to that, there are some strategies and bullet points on a PDF rendition of those slides. And of course, we're going to talk about signposting before I turn back over to Sam. We have an audience that was able to sign up via Eventbrite. And so I just want to make a couple of quick statements about when I'm talking about hate crimes and hate incidents, what I mean. So hate incidents and crimes are acts of violence or hostility that are directed at people because of who they are or who someone thinks they are. And they can be the result of a number of different factors like race, religion or beliefs, sexual orientation, alternative subculture, gender, transgender identity. But where mental health fits into that is with disability. So when we talk about disability hate crimes, mental health fits into or within that umbrella. And as you're probably aware, a hate incident becomes a hate crime when there's a criminal offense. And I say that because someone might be harassed or verbally abused many times by even the same person before there's actually a crime committed. So just to put that into a bit of context for you. I said I was going to share some statistics and also just some questions for you. I'm going to do this by way of a poll. So if you're paying attention to my screen, you see that I've just asked you a question, but I'm going to put that up there as a poll as well. The reason why we like doing them as polls is because it's anonymous, and also more people tend to participate. So I've just launched that poll on your screen. So the question to you is, how many people in the UK will experience a mental health problem every year? So I'm going to give, we've got already more than half the people have responded. I'm going to wait till I get a little bit closer to the full set, and then I will reveal your responses before I reveal the answer. So just a couple more seconds. Okay, we've got 90% of the people. I'm going to count to 5 and then end the poll. Okay, so let me share with you what you thought first, so you can see that most of you, or half of you, said 1 in 4, and the remaining some other number. And I'm going to stop sharing that to tell you that the correct answer is 1 in 4. So 1 in 4 people in the UK will experience a mental health problem every year. And that number hasn't changed very much over the last several years. So thank you for participating in that. Here's your next question. And again, I'm going to put that up there as a poll to you, which I have just launched. So Hampshire Constabulary recorded a certain percentage increase in hate crimes in 1920 compared to 1516. So what was that increase in that span of time? So again, starting to see some responses. Give you a few more minutes to think about that. Right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And once again, I'm going to share your results with you first. So most of you, 67%, said 45%. Some said a little bit higher. And I think I have a well-educated group here because the answer is 45%. So let me just put that into a little bit of context. So that is for all hate crimes. And I said earlier that when we talk about mental health, that goes under the umbrella of disability hate crimes. And sadly, there was an increase there as well. It was 9%. So about just over 9,000 disability hate crimes. But here's another statistic I haven't put up there that I'll share with you, however. Just 1% of those cases were referred to the Crown Prosecution Service or charged. And we'll talk a little bit about why there may be some barriers to that as well. So again, thank you for participating in that. One more question here. This isn't really a trick question, and I've got a reason for asking it. So I've just launched that question to you. Do you have mental health? Okay. That's just about everybody who has voted again. So I'm going to end the poll and I am going to share the results with you. And again, I thank you. It's an anonymous poll. I thank you for being honest about it. So most of you said yes, and then we had a couple of other answers. And the answer is yes. And I can understand why someone may say no or may be uncertain about it, because oftentimes when we think about mental health, we almost unconsciously insert the word ill between the mental ill health. But the truth of the matter is that we all have mental health the same way that we have physical health. And again, it could be somewhere good, bad, or in between. The model that I've just turned over here emphasizes something that's important for us to consider, and that is that mental health is not simply the absence of mental illness. And that means that it's possible to have very good mental health while living with a mental health condition. And that's our top left-hand quadrant there that you're looking at. But that's not always the perception in society. Labeled with a diagnosis, we don't always recognize that a person can still have very high levels of general mental well-being. And that is something that we as the society need to consider. If you look at the bottom right-hand quadrant, we also need to recognize that for any number of different reasons, that people who do not have a diagnosis can have very poor well-being. And, you know, whether they're unable to or resistant to seeking help, that is something that is also part of what we need to deal with in society. So again, not necessarily a diagnosis, but we still have a number of people who have poor mental health. And it could very well be that a barrier for them to get that help may in fact be stigma. There's an organization called Very Well Mind, and they've talked about how stigma is not limited to mental conditions, and we know that. But I think it's probably true to say that there's the attitude towards psychiatric illnesses tend to be more negative than towards medical conditions. And we know, because research has told us, that stigma is one of the leading risk factors contributing to poor mental health outcomes, because it can mean delays in treatment. It can also reduce the chances that someone with mental illness will receive appropriate and adequate care. And it is important for us to pause and think about that. So since you've all warmed up your fingers a little bit, I'm going to ask you to play a little game with me. So quick activity. I want you to think about the language you hear, the language you use. And first, I'm going to ask you in the chat box in 10 seconds or less to come up with a positive or neutral word that describes mental health. Positive and neutral words starting now. You're only getting 10 seconds. Go. Okay, that's 10 seconds. Holly says happy. Ruth says good shame. Janet says smile. And then we have well-being. Okay, we're going to pause there because that was the 10 seconds. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds. And this time, I want you to come up with a judgmental or negative word around mental health, starting now. Okay, there it is. That's 10 seconds. Now, could be that you warmed up your fingers, but we had more judgmental negative words than we had positive ones. And that is always the case whenever I play this little game with my audience, because it's so easy for us to come up with negative words rather than positive words. Again, thank you for sharing those. And those are all words that I think we've probably heard before as well. So my point here being is that language matters in mental health. The words we use shape how we see the world. The words we use influence our decisions and our beliefs and potentially our well-being as well. So, do we use words like neurotic, psychotic, depressed without really giving it much of a second thought? What impact might that have to someone who actually has that mental health condition? You know, I flipped over to some slide, which there's some very common phrases that we might hear. One that we hear, or I certainly seem to hear most, is about OCD. You know, I'm OCD when I load the dishwasher. I think, in fact, our Chancellor of the Exchequer said that a few months ago and then apologized for it. Think about sitting across the table from someone who actually has OCD. How diminishing, how degrading it might be for them to hear someone say that. And, you know, I see in the Callum says, could it be because there's a list of negative stigma? Yes, absolutely agree with you, and absolutely right there with you. So again, it's important for us to think about the words that we use, because if we can mitigate some stigma, we might be able to, down the road, also share that with other people, and we might see a diminishment in the number of hate crimes that we have. You know, and again, just sort of thinking about the language that we use, to start using person-first language as well. And by that, I mean, instead of calling someone a schizophrenic, the more respectful phrase is a person who lives with schizophrenia. It is a label, not the person itself. So if you take anything away from today, be aware of the language that you use and the impact that it can have on other people. You know, some people might say it's practice and not language that matters, but I'm going to disagree there. I'm going to say that words can be a barrier to seeking help, and that words can be a motivator for making discrimination acceptable, and discrimination is what can lead us into hate incidents and hate crimes. Okay. Guess what? I've got one more question for you. So we're going to do this again as a poll. So you can see the question there. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. So according to Stop Hate UK, hate crime affects 2 out of 4 people with mental health problems. Is that true or false? That's half the population who has a mental health problem. See, the numbers are moving back and forth, back and forth. Just going to give it 3 more seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. Okay, that's almost everybody. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results with you. So you can see that most of you said it was true, few of you thought it was false. And the answer is actually, it's false. And the reason why it's false is it's not 2 out of 4, it's 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4 people are affected by hate crime who have mental health problems. So we know there is something we need to do about that. And perhaps this is a good opportunity to talk about how those with mental health conditions are targeted. This is just one quote on my side from a service user. It was published in December as part of a report called Keeping Control. And that is actually a resource for mental health service users. You know, and sadly, for those who experience targeted violence and abuse because of their mental health, they're falling through gaps in various social and service systems, whether it's safeguarding or safety or risk management. Service users may discount their own experiences of violence or abuse, not expecting to be believed, or not believing that hate crime actually applies to them. And they may also be discounted by others on the grounds of their mental health status. Their lack of credibility is often reflected back to them by services, by friends and family, by neighbors, and even by the general public. So this next slide just looks at a graphic from a report that was published by the National Mind organization a few years back. You know, the title of this report perhaps says a lot about the current state of stigma that surrounds mental health. The title is At Risk, Yet Dismissed. And while the report was published a few years ago, I do think it still gives us some scope to understand why those are targeted feel they are vulnerable. So if you're looking at my slide, all of the blurbs on the left talk to mental health factors, perceptions of why the crime happens. So for example, less able to protect themselves. The top three in the right-hand column also have a bit of a mental health factor, like behaving differently. So just take a moment to look through those, and perhaps we can get some insight on where there's scope for improvement, even just more generally. Maybe one thing we can do as individuals, despite what might feel like a bit of an overwhelming systemic issue that we have, is to educate ourselves about mental health, to listen to those who may come to us feeling distressed, and to really help them find professional help. And it is my goal over the next hour or so to give you some information around that. So I wonder what you think are the most common mental health conditions. So again, I'm going to invite you to go to the chat box. Tell me, what do you think are the most common mental health conditions in the UK? You know, what, just one, if you can come up with it. Let's get the chat box rocking with a few answers there. What do you think are common mental health conditions? So Shelley first says anxiety. Holly, Janet say depression, along with a few other people. Callum says that as well. Our iPhone says that. Sarah says that. I can see bipolar disorder is written there. Thank you, Ruth, for that contribution. So seeing lots of depression and anxiety as most common mental health conditions. While you're doing that, I can see that Ruth is also commented OCD. I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. Let me just tell you that the order in which they appear on my slide now is the order in their prevalence in the UK, and that comes from the National Mind database based on a survey that assessed psychiatric disorder to diagnostic criteria. So top of the list, mixed anxiety and depression. So many of you mentioned that. So mixed anxiety, depression, symptoms of both anxiety and depression. I'm going to talk about both of those in a moment. Many people are surprised that eating disorders is so high on the list. So whereas mixed anxiety and depression, about 8 per 100 of the population, eating disorders, according to the charity BEAT, B-E-A-T, which is the national charity for eating disorders, 6 or 7 per 100 of the population. And then you can see the rest. And then the next couple are anxiety disorders. We see depression, we see phobias, which again is an anxiety disorder, extreme fear, as well as bipolar disorder, which sometimes fits in as a mood disorder because of those mood swings, and then schizophrenia and obsessive compulsive disorder, less in the population, about 1 per 100 of the population. So again, I just wanted to present that to you because it's good to understand what's happening again in our own world, in our world here being the UK specifically. For the next, say, 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk about each of those three, just to give you a sense of what it means to have depression and to give you a bit of information. So just bear with me if you are somebody who is in the mental health sphere and knows a lot about these, just so quick slides about each of those. So first, depression. Depression is that feeling of low mood, lasts for a long time. Look, we all feel depressed every once in a while, and it passes. But for those people who have depression, it is exhausting. It makes them feel unmotivated, makes them feel worthy, and it manifests itself in physical ways through sleep or appetite or even their sex drive. Look, what we know too is that in its mildest form, depression doesn't stop people from leading the normal life. Think about that top left-hand quadrant of the continuum I showed earlier. It does make things harder to do. At its most severe, however, depression can make people feel suicidal, and that obviously is life-threatening. You'll occasionally see me post little quotations on my slides, and these are from service users of Solent Mind, just to give that sense of what is it like, what does it feel like to have depression? And we see that sadness, and then that numbness and that emptiness. Also here, the Blur Foundation's got an excellent website if you want to learn a little bit more about anxiety and depression. They have a lot for people who have lived experience. And here's one we always think of depression as people feeling sad or showing a bit of body language around that. But the truth of the matter is many people mask depression as well as other mental health conditions. In fact, to quote from someone with lived experience, "We can still smile and laugh when we have depression, but you don't see what goes on in our heads and when we're alone in our thoughts." Next, again, a common in the United Kingdom, anxiety. Anxiety is what we feel when we're worried, tense, or afraid, usually about things that are going to happen in the future. And again, occasional anxiety, it's a normal human experience. It's the way we're wired. We have been from back in caveman times, where we have anxiety about things and we either flee or we run. It's that fight or flight response. But again, that passes for us. For those people who have been diagnosed with anxiety, it's overwhelming. Those feelings are strong. It is debilitating. And again, it also manifests itself in physical ways as well, like sleep and panic attacks. For some people that feel like they are having a heart attack. So many people show up at A&E, think they're having a heart attack when it is in fact an anxiety attack. It is a serious illness. It is not something that people can snap out of. And again, here we can see about someone, a service user says it's horrible, and about being judged. Sometimes we can't find words to express how we feel. And so we use other forms of expression like art or poetry or photography. And here's an illustration. And tell me that that is not someone who has anxiety. You can feel how frightening this is. And the quote from the artist, "There is a moment when you can't help but sink deep down, attacked by spiteful thoughts. But oh dear, I was the monster." And then finally, just a couple of quick slides about eating disorders, that third of the most common mental health conditions in the UK. I would say that many people aren't aware of the extent, the debilitating outcomes of eating disorder, and that there are a lot of misperceptions. It's not about teenage girls who want to fit into the party dress. It can affect anyone, age, gender, weight. 1 in 4 people who are diagnosed with an eating disorder in the UK are male, for example. And it's not just about disordered eating. The truth of the matter is that when we can't express ourselves, when we have distressing thoughts, feelings, difficult things that we're dealing with, we want to find a sense of control. And for people with eating disorders, that is their control. I would just say to you that if you want to learn more about eating disorders, to please use the Charity Beat. Their website has some really good information there. And again, just a small quote from someone who is a service user. And the other truth of the matter is that there are so many people with eating disorders whose weight don't change because they manage that so well. So don't think about it as someone getting very thin or very fat. Again, if you feel it's something you want to know more about, please do find a way to educate yourself. In fact, this slide is actually from the Charity Beat, and it gives us a little bit of information about how we may recognize someone who may be developing an eating disorder. So again, I bring that to you because it's important for us to be thinking about the mental health conditions that are most prevalent in our organization. What I'd like to do next is to share a short video with you. Should pop up on my screen in a moment. You can see the title to it as well. And I'll give you an opportunity afterwards to reflect. And perhaps as you're thinking about this, it'll harken back to what we talked about language and stigma. So here goes. Let's hope it works.
I missed out on big chunks of my education because of lack of understanding about mental health. My fellow students didn't understand. To them, I was an emo, a freak, a weirdo who cut herself for attention and hated life. To all my teachers, I seemed to be a pink elephant in the room, awkward and not to be discussed. I was obviously going through some stuff, but I was a teen. How bad could it be?
Being in school is not easy. It's difficult for everyone, but with mental health problems on top, it makes it 10 times harder.
People call me lazy and think they can say what they want to me, but it really hurts me inside when people treat me differently. I can't help it. People kept spreading rumours about me, telling people I was dangerous and they should stop hanging around with me. People pushed me and called me an attention seeker, but they didn't understand. Because I missed so much school, people didn't bother making friends with me really, and I used to feel very isolated. I started getting comments online about being ugly and mental and saying I'd be better off killing myself.
Wait, don't tell anyone. She's got a broken leg.
Yeah, but is it actually a proper diagnosed broken leg?
You're just having a bad day. Attention seeker.
Flipping heck, it's only a broken leg. That's not even a real thing.
For God's sake, it's just a broken leg. Get over it.
I'm going to stop the video there. So again, just an opportunity to be thinking about it. And I picked this particular video because it had that nice juxtaposition of how we treat physical impairments, if you will, as well. So I'd like to hear a few reflections. Happy to have somebody come off mic if you like, or as always, the chat box is open and I'm paying attention to it. So what did you think about that?
It's actually true, isn't it? That's exactly how mental health is treated, has been treated in the past. For the last 25, 30 years, it hasn't changed. I thought we would have seen improvements over the years, but I don't feel that it's got any better for young people in schools. And it's a shame that it hasn't got better for young people. And I do feel empathy for them, that it hasn't got better in a school setting. It should have done, and we should be doing better. We are failing our young people. That's all I can say, Donna, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And it is true, and perhaps many people don't realize that the onset of mental health is in those formative years as well. And so we should be trying to spend more time thinking about how we can make it better for our young people. I see Ruth has put a note in the comment that people don't realize that their comments are hurtful. And I wholeheartedly agree with that too. And again, I hearken back to when we flippantly say something about being treating OCD when that is a true debilitating, serious illness for people. And maybe we can all make little strides in trying to be better about the words that we use. Holly says it's hard to determine intent sometimes. I would agree with that as well. And again, sometimes it's perhaps on the cusp of being something hurtful. Yeah, we just need to be better educated, I think, overall. Anyone else wanted to add anything before we move on? I don't want to move away from that if someone has another comment or would like to come off mic. All right, thank you again. Remember, the chat box is always open. I've always got an eye to it as well. And if I don't, that's what Sam's there for as well, to keep me honest if I've missed something in the chat box. So just, moving on then, I do want to talk a little bit about, just a little bit more about mental health conditions before we move into really focusing on targeting and hate incidents. So again, I'm going to just ask you to pop into the chat box. What do you think might trigger a mental health condition? What are your thoughts about that? I mean, we saw a little there from that video from the young woman. What is it that you think might trigger a mental health condition? So again, I'd like to see some responses in the chat box if you would. I'm going to talk about some specifically. So I can see Ruth says trauma, absolutely. Correct, Cara behind that as well. We certainly know that that is a part of it. Holly, absolutely true. Environment. We are made up of our environment, socioeconomic factors, all of these things shape our window on the world, and those can be it. And certainly Ruth is saying breakup of parents. We can see illness, Sarah says. Absolutely, Ruth, drug abuse and abuse. So keep those coming in. I just want to talk about the few that I've put up here because they really do probably speak to today's time. So first, what do I mean by the current situation? I mean the pandemic. It has been such a struggle for so many people for a lot of different reasons. If you were to look at the ONS statistics, anxiety and depression, really the numbers jump quite a bit, startlingly so. And I suppose, this is the first time for most of us in our lifetime to have gone through this experience of a pandemic in a long term, certainly here in the UK. Just again, looking at the chat box, yes, financial struggles, bereavement, physical injury, again, all of those things. I also put loneliness as one I wanted to talk about for just a moment. For two reasons. One is it is Mental Health Awareness Week, as mentioned earlier by Sam, and this year's theme is loneliness. Loneliness is different than being alone. Loneliness is when you want to have social connection, when you strive to be with people, but for any number of reasons you are unable to. Many of us just choose to be alone, but loneliness is something that is very challenging for people because they don't have the means or unable to reach out and be connected. We also know that sadly, domestic violence has increased in the last 2 years, and we know that that can exacerbate a mental health condition. That may also be a part of hate incident as well. And because we've already been talking about discrimination and stigma, that is also something that can either trigger or exacerbate a mental health condition. I see, Emma, you've also put in poverty, which was my next one there. So again, that social disadvantage, poverty, or debt. It probably comes as no surprise to most of you in the virtual room with me that the number of people who are below the median level of income in England is in double figures. And I think we consider ourselves a rich country. So the number is hovering, I think, right now about 18%, and that's before inflation, energy charges, etc. So that is for us perhaps a point to be thinking about, will mental illness rise again? Will we see more problems with hate incidents and hate crimes because so many people are at a disadvantage? All of the other ones that are here you have mentioned as well. And again, that is really just a point of awareness that we want to make sure that we come away with understanding a little bit about what can trigger a mental health condition. Part of my role at Solent Mind is to talk about those particular things. We are running slightly ahead of schedule, which is good. I'm sure that makes Sam very happy. Why don't we just take a quick break now, because that sort of ends my discussion about mental health and a little bit of awareness education. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about barriers and how you can help in the next part of the session. So it's a good opportunity with a little over an hour to go to perhaps take 5 or 6 minutes, get yourself a glass of water, walk around a little bit, and we will come back. I have 17 minutes past the hour. If we can come back in, let's say 6 minutes or so. So something, I'll put that in the chat box. So something just before 25 past the hour, that would be brilliant and gives us enough time to get through the rest of the presentation.
Donna, I won't be able to stay for the next part. I'm really sorry. You're on mute.
Gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you so much for the first part. I wish I could stay for the next part, but it's been very useful. I am going to see one of your gentlemen at Mayfield Gardens, Rob. So I will be going to see him next week, I believe it is, with Anna from Southampton Children's Play Association. So I can't wait to go and see him. But I've not been well recently, so that's why the meeting that I had arranged had been cancelled. So, but thank you so much. I truly am so grateful for people like yourself at Solent Minds. You do so much amazing work for everybody. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you, Sarah. And this is being recorded, so hopefully you'll find time to listen to this.
Will we get a recording as well?
Yes, it will be posted.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that is so wonderful. So thank you so much, Donna. But no, thank you so much for you and your team. But thank you so much for today. And I hope you have a peaceful evening.
Thank you very much, and you.
Thank you. Take care. Thank you so much. Sam's not at his desk, but please say goodbye to Sam for me.
Will do.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey folks, it's just turned 3:24 on my watch. I'm just going to give it another minute and wait to see Sam's smiling face come back on the screen. Hard to me, of course, for me, of course, to know if you're back. If you want to just give a quick flash of your screen to see your face, or just sort of put your hand up to say that you're there, that'll be brilliant. But we'll get started in, as I said, thanks for that, Will. As soon as I see Sam comes back into the room, I don't want to start without him. So again, in the first hour, we talked quite a bit about stigma and a little bit of, as I said, an education about mental health and common mental health conditions. And in this remaining time we have together, going to talk with you a bit about what those barriers are for people who have been targeted to seek help, and some ways that you can potentially help them as well. And also to some signposting for support. So that's what our remaining time together looks like. So I'll go ahead and switch over to my next slide as people are just coming back into the virtual room. And again, thank you for your attention in that. Let me just ask you, for those of you who have come back and joined the room, could you put in the chat box for me one barrier you think that you can think of related to seeking help when someone has experienced a hate incident or a hate crime? What do you think one barrier may be to them being or wanting to seek help? So Callum right away says embarrassment. Holly says knowing where to go for help. Thank you for that, Holly, because that is true. We hear that time and time again at Solent Mind, where people are uncertain about where to go. Shame, yes. Ruth says fear. Emma mentions minimizing. Yes, thank you very much for that. Cara, long waiting lists. I don't even know what to say about that, except it is very, very true. Dan mentions, Dan, Mitch, and Chelsea over at Willowbrook, thank you. Lack of evidence, yes. And, I mentioned a statistic earlier about only 1% of those disability hate crimes are actually followed through with the CPS and charged, and that's such a small percentage there. Ruth, another good point, saying reprisal. So again, thank you for sharing those. And I'm just going to put up a list here. And again, this list comes from that same report that I mentioned earlier from National Mind, which was done in conjunction with victim support. So I'll put them all up there first and then just sort of talk to each of them. I think some of these are very obvious. So again, fearing the response that they will receive. Mentioned earlier about how sometimes the response from services as well as from family and friends is disappointing. Fear of making the situation worse. Knowing the perpetrator. So again, barriers of other services as well, where they're just not fit for purpose or don't even exist. Poor responses by individuals and services. First impressions can be quite lasting. And so as said by Callum, previous encounters, failed prosecution may mean for people that they don't want to go through that level of effort again. I also put up there the impact of the crime. And what I mean by that, again, someone mentioned feelings of shame. Also, just the overwhelming obstacles to be able to, and one of those obstacles may mean not knowing where to go. Another one would be not wanting to relive that experience. So the impact of that crime, not wanting to relive that. Also, mental health problems themselves as barriers. So we know that many people who have a mental health condition also have very low self-esteem. And so they may not feel that they deserve help, or they don't want to trouble other people. Also, we know that, there is, for certain mental health conditions, that those episodes of increased depression or even disordered thinking that happens with some mental health conditions, those present a barrier to people as well. So again, I thank you for your contributions in the chat box. So what does that all mean? Again, so less than half of victims with mental health problems even report something to the police. And that obviously is a very low number. But there was one recommendation that came to the report that I wanted to share with you, and that is that, oops, that happened oddly. Friends, family, and professionals were felt to be key to encouraging people to report incidents and to seek help. So in some ways, maybe each of us has a role to help in getting people to seek the appropriate help, even if that is a bit of signposting, which, you know, I will come to in a minute. I talked about helping others. And again, there are lots of different things that we can do to help others. And I've just put up a list there. I'd love to hear if you have any comments about that, or if you have any experience that you would like to share. So some of the ways that we can help others is just to listen. Because sometimes listening makes things so much better, and to offer reassurance that there is help out there, that there are agencies that can help as well, and to not make assumptions about what is happening for that person. Let them have their voice to speak. You know, practical support can be challenging sometimes. And when I'm talking about practical support, you know, it can be something as simple as helping them go to appointments, or walking their dog, you know, little things that you can help them with. Also, what we've heard from service users is they appreciate when people know more about the problems that they're experiencing. Just a little note at the bottom there, however you are involved, please remember to look after yourself as well. And that also it's important to respect that person's privacy so that they build a sense of trust with you. But remember that confidentiality needs to cease if someone expresses harm to themselves or others. So I did want to share with you again, from that report, what service users said is appreciated. So they said emotional support is appreciated. And what I mean by emotional support is having someone who they could talk to, who would listen to their experiences and be attentive to them. The practical support that they talked about was help with childcare, some sort of support with safety if you were in a position to do so. And for services, they appreciated help with accommodation and financial assistance. And many people said advocacy, being a voice for others in ways that are appropriate. Advice, a number of people spoke about receiving helpful advice about what their rights are and what options are available to them, as well as signposting, which I will come to in a little bit. For all of those, the influence of others outside of that person can really be very crucial in helping someone report to the police. And yes, a lot of voluntary organizations and community services do that. But it can be friends, it can be colleagues, it can be mental health services. All of those were mentioned in the report as opportunities to help others. I also wanted to mention what people felt were valued when they were targeted with a hate crime or a hate incident. So the first one is empathy, and someone used empathy. It was Sarah earlier, who sadly had to leave Sam and said to give her your regards. So what is an empathetic response? Well, an empathetic response is one of care and concern for what the person's experienced, like really listening and showing an understanding of the effect that it's had on them. Validation was important. That's about acknowledging, accepting, believing or confirming that that person's experience was real and their emotional reaction to it. Also, responsiveness. So, you know, again, people spoke positively about services that help them to resolve issues or to investigate, as well as those that offer them support. And then again, individual and respectful treatment, being treated as an individual with unique needs, with different perspective, different experiences than everyone else, because it has a very unique feel to how people react to a hate incident or a hate crime. And how can we demonstrate that? Just asking people what help they wanted, respecting their opinions, respecting their needs, and respecting the course of action that they want to take. And then finally, of course, professionals with knowledge were valued. So if you are in that sphere, just know that many people appreciated professionals with specific knowledge about mental health, and also the impacts of victimization. And by that, I mean, understanding about the effects of hate incidents or hate crimes, and, being able to help in some way. So again, we're thinking about how we can help others. Just know that those are what is valued and appreciated by people who have in the past been targeted with hate incidents or hate crimes. I said if I had some time, and I do, I wanted to just cover a couple of things that perhaps we can do proactively in our workplaces. And so again, some key drivers that help people stay mentally well at work are currently on my slide now. So again, being part of something, belonging. There's a lot of literature lately about this sense of belonging and how important it is. And it actually goes back to that feeling of loneliness that people are experiencing these days as well. Being in control of one's own work, meaning being able to contribute to decisions that affect the outcome and how the work is done and when the work is done, is very important to well-being and having that sense of purpose and achievement. And don't discount a nice environment, a glossy green plant, something that's really comfortable for people. And always the opportunity to learn new things. People always tell us that where there's an opportunity to learn and to spread their wings a little bit, that it means so much at the office, and again, contributes to mental well-being. If you've not heard of the 5 ways to well-being, this is something else that you can also bring to your own workplace. And again, it's not in some ways just about workplace. We can really look at this about building habits in our lives that protect our well-being, to find ways to build our resilience, and that will lower our risk of mental health conditions. It helps us cope with stress. So each of these 5 ways is science-backed. There's evidence that each of these can lower rates of anxiety or depression, for example, or help us create that sense of belonging that's so important and that boosts our mood. And they were developed quite some time ago, 2008. In the UK, they are affordable, they are accessible. So again, if you're in a place in your organization where you work, where you can contribute to something in your well-being plan, I would say certainly this is something that you would want to bring to the table. And again, if you have any questions about it, this is not a Solent Mind product. Again, it was developed by the New Economic Forum back in 2008. You'll find different versions of it, including on the NHS. But if you just took a look at those things and said, do these really contribute to well-being? Yes, they absolutely do. So if we can, yes, we want to react and be able to help people who are targeted, but at the same time, we want to also do those things that will help build their resilience and to help them on a path to recovery. And the 5 ways to well-being are science-backed ways to do that. So again, you'll get a copy of these slides and you will have an opportunity to review those. So before I turn back over to Sam, I just wanted to cover a couple of key points. And again, if you have any questions specifically for me, now's an opportunity to drop those into the chat box. But we spent a lot of time talking about language and how language matters. So I will repeat again that language, the words we use, the way they shape our beliefs, those can be a barrier to someone seeking help. They can also be a motivation for discrimination. And we know that that path to discrimination can lead to hate incidents and hate crimes. So we need to do what we can. Emma, I see your question. How do you change the attitude of perpetrators or community? One person at a time, I think. And again, organizations like the one that Sam is going to, I'm going to let him address that question in his closing remarks as well. The more people get involved, the more we challenge as well what people say when we're talking about language. And I'm saying not in an aggressive way, but reminding people that the words they use are important. Even the example I gave earlier about, not using labels like OCD to describe how we act when we don't have that diagnosis. It's probably small steps at a time. Certainly more government funding would help as well to allow more groups to be able to speak out and to reach a larger community. Some of that, I hope, is happening. The other thing that we want to think about is how those triggers to mental health conditions are so many, and they are rooted in social, environmental, or behavioral factors. So again, what can we do about that? We can't change the system. We can really hope to help people through advocacy to help them to get the support that they need as well, so that they can be more resilient, be prepared to be able to find that path to better mental health and well-being. Again, people with mental health problems are more likely to be victims of crime than the general population. And a lot of people don't realize that. They sort of flip it on its head and say that people with a mental health condition are more likely to be violent. That is not the case. It is rare that people with a mental health condition will be violent. The crimes are against them and not perpetrated by them in most cases. I'm not saying that there aren't crimes that are committed by those who have mental illness. What I'm saying is they are more likely to be victims of crime. And that's something that needs also to be better made better aware in our organization. And then finally, thinking about what those barriers are to people who are experiencing hate incidents or crime, not being believed. So what can we do about that? We can listen and take their truth. Previous poor experiences of attempting to get help, again, very little we could do about that, but except to say, to push a little bit harder and to let people who have had multiple experiences know that there is a chance that their voice will be heard. Not being identified as needing additional help and support is also a barrier. And then, of course, the impact, as I said, of the mental health crime problem and of the crime itself. These are all barriers to people with mental health conditions. And again, agencies like those that Sam represents are hopefully trying to slowly but surely take on those battles and win small battles so that we can win the war eventually. I promised you some signposting, and here it is. So again, the top bullets are really support for those people who have been targeted. If they look like hyperlinks, they are. And when you get the PDF rendition, these will all be live links for you. So I mentioned third-party reporting centers earlier. Positive Minds, which is affiliated with Solent Mind in Portsmouth, is one of those third-party reporting centers. The list is there for you. There's also an app called Love Don't Hate that you can download for either Android or Apple. 101 is meant to be that phone call that you can also use to reach out to, signpost to. And then, of course, Stop Hate UK, which I mentioned earlier. They have a toll-free number as well as a texting service for those who would rather text than talk. The bottom bullets are all general support for mental health and well-being. I put Solent Mind there. Again, they do have web chat, and there are also, you can see the hours that are there. NHS 111, if you weren't aware, is staffed with mental health nurses. So if you had somebody call, they would be able to reach out there. Sane Line is one that, again, an out-of-hours service for people who are looking for mental health support. Probably most of us are familiar with Samaritans. Shout is a text service. And then I put a link to a number of other resources on the National Mind site as well. Callum, I see you have a note that you can text BTP discreetly, which goes to the control room. Thank you for sharing that with us as well. I appreciate that very much. So again, I'm going to turn over to Callum with the, excuse me, to Sam with the remaining time that we have. Please, if you have any questions, do ask them. My last slide actually is a feedback slide. So we'd really appreciate if you can give us some feedback. The QR code is for those of you who have a mobile. You can point it to the QR code and you will be linked to the Solent Mind feedback form. So I'm going to leave that up there and I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to say thank you to all of you for all of your chats and your comments. Really enjoyed being able to present to you today. I can see that Will has put in report to Police Online or through True Vision. Holly is asking what True Vision is. Sam, will you be able to respond to what True Vision is?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think yeah, I see, Will, you've just put in a thanks for responding to that on the chat. That's great. Yeah. So so no, we'll I'll probably, yeah, best I don't talk about that because I don't have as much information, but yeah, by all means, I can give the, yeah, that we can yeah, I can pass on the yeah, the emails for that at the end if needs be. But anyway, I'll yeah, thank you very much for Donna for you delivering that presentation today, and everyone that's come. It was you know, I thought hopefully you've got some really good information from that. Before I because we have got 10 minutes or so before the end of the session, and obviously this was mainly a chance for Donna to talk about mental health and things. So yeah, I'll give an opportunity for you now to ask any questions. If you want to turn up your microphone and ask them, feel free to do so. But if not, then obviously you've got the chat and I'll give the emails out. Yeah, I'll send an email to everyone with both myself and Donna's email, so you can ask questions then as well. That's fine. But yeah, I'll basically I'm just going to wrap up the session today by giving a short little presentation on what our network's about and how you can contact our network, and a little bit of information about the next upcoming sessions. So you just bear with me while I get my screen up with the presentation.
Would you like me to? Oh, there it goes.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, so we'll just, sorry about this. Brilliant. Okay, so as you can see, there's some information here on our network. So yes, basically we're the Southampton and South Hampshire hate crime network, and yeah, what I'm a coordinator for our group, and basically we're a some of you, by the way, may have heard this information before, but just for those who haven't, we're a network of yeah, work in partnership with 50 different groups across Southampton and the surrounding areas on tackling hate crime. yeah, basically by wearing awareness of issues, you know, related to hate crime, and also making sure there are mechanisms in place to support victims and anyone else affected by hate crime. Yeah, we're always looking to expand what we're doing and, you know, increase our diversity and the communities that we represent. So, you know, if you feel like your organization or group that you're part of might want to be part of our network, then we'd definitely be happy to hear from you. And yeah, feel free to do that by yeah, emailing me, which you can see, sam.waddington@spectrumcil.co.uk, or you can ring me at 07511 618 232. That's the best number to get hold of me. And then if you want some more information about the network, then feel free to use the link on our website and our Facebook page. On this presentation will be sent to everyone afterwards as well, so you can you don't have to remember those now. But yeah, we're also just happy to take any queries about our work. So as you can see down here, it says yeah, if you want any a full list of organizations or some resources to help you raise hate crime awareness, then yeah, please get in touch with me, and or just any general queries you can yeah, I'll be happy to answer those, or direct you to the right people to answer your queries. But yeah, that's basically just an overall summary of the work that we do. So the next slide is just a little bit of some information about upcoming sessions, and these are yeah, as I say, they're upcoming hate crime sessions, but they might also be about related topics like today, for example. So yeah, we have got one which is a while away in November about hate crime towards young people, as that's during anti-bullying week. So we will yeah, we'll be running that, and I've obviously got all your email addresses, so I'll send out the information about that as we approach it. But there'll be many more sessions that we hope to run before then. So yeah, look out for the information on that, and yeah, it will be good to see you if you're able to attend. So yeah, that's basically an introduction for now. As I said, you can ask me questions following today's session, but yeah, now is an opportunity if you would like to answer myself a question, or Donna, if you've got any questions.